So, I'm going to go over my experiences for you about working with the cyanotype process. Basically, what I did was I did this in our own studio. All of the materials that I got, except for the cyanotype chemicals, I got from Kroger. So, the most expensive thing was probably the baby ball jars here for like $7.98. Empty ketchup bottle, $1.98. Distilled water is really cheap. Measuring spoon's really cheap. I thought that I was going to need to use the large graduated pitcher, but because of the sizing of these small ball jars, I didn't need to. You will want to pre-cut your paper. I would suggest using a heavier paper, some kind of watercolor paper, although smooth surface seems to work a little bit better than textured surface. Textured surface will give you more of a grainy look, and a smooth surface paper will give you more resolution. These are the actual chemicals that I got. At the time of putting this assignment on, I thought that everybody could get the Jacquard two-part, which they already have it mixed and calibrated, and you don't have to do any measuring. There's a part A and a part B that you mix together. It looks like those items are back ordered. So I went ahead and through a science company ordered the raw materials, and I measured it myself. I really think the Jacquard's a little bit easier because if you get off on your measuring, it can affect the outcome. If you can't get the chemicals or you can't get the Jacquard kit, you can order paper that is pre-sensitized. It'll give you a nice, perfect image if you want to. But if you want to delve a little bit more into the process, I would suggest using the Jacquard or getting the chemicals. So what you need is potassium ferric cyanide and ferric ammonium citrate. You will need something like foam brushes to apply the mixture to the paper. These are usually pretty cheap. You can get these just about anywhere. So I found this. We had a plastic tray. You do not want to use this for cooking also. I'm a bit leery about using something like this after I've used chemicals on it. So if, just don't do it. Try to find something that is glass or plastic. It's just so that you can apply the solution to the paper. Latex gloves. Get some latex gloves. You don't want to get this stuff on your hands. I do have posted on the Canvas site the MSDS sheets. The chemical that is the most hazardous is the green part, which is, let's see, let me jump ahead. This stuff is the most hazardous. It's a 2 out of 4, which isn't horrible. The ferric ammonium citrate. But you're going to want to use latex gloves. You don't want to get this stuff on your hands. This is something that I thought would be a good way to store the paper, but I would not suggest doing this. I took a piece of a garbage bag, and I created like this little portfolio that you could put the pieces in. It would keep them, since they're light sensitive, it would keep them out of the light. But I'll explain a little bit later why I wouldn't recommend this. Now, one of the nice things about these miniature ball jars is if you're mixing your own chemicals, these are 118 milliliters. The recipe calls for using 100 milliliters, so a little bit below the top here, and you're in the ballpark of where you need to be for your distilled water. So these are great. They almost come like pre-made for this project. On the cyanotype process page, I took the measurements that they have for the recipe. So for these different things, you'll have like approximately 6 teaspoons or approximately 2.5 or 3 teaspoons. The more accurate that can be, the better your recipe is going to be. So what I did was I measured these out, and you just put the chemical into the miniature ball jars. So here's the ferric ammonium citrate in a jar, and then you're going to add distilled water. So since this is 100 milligrams, I measure out the quantity of the chemical in each one, fill it up with distilled water. I'm going to shake that. So I shook it, and you want to make sure that all of the chemical is dissolved so you get a solution. Once those two parts are thoroughly mixed, then you can pour them into your ketchup dispensing jar. This makes it easier to put out small quantities of this. And I found that with 200 milliliters, this creates quite a lot of fluid. You can coat tons of pages with this. I didn't even use probably half of it, and I did 20 pages. So it might be a little bit more cost effective to do it this way than buying the pre-coated sheets. Cost-wise, I probably have enough chemical to, I don't even know, probably make 10 times this much, so I'm probably set for making cyanotypes for the next 3 years. If you buy pre-coated sheets, I would say make sure that you get more than 12. In order to get the 10 that I'm requiring, you're going to have some screw-ups, you're going to have to do some exposure time to figure things out. So just in the exposure time, I probably went through 15 of my 20 sheets, figuring out exposure times, figuring out what transparencies work best. So if you have 12, you can blow through those pretty quickly, getting sorted how to do the process. Then what I did was, from that ketchup dispenser, you put a little bit into the tray, and with the foam brush, you just brush it on. Now the video shows this being a little bit more yellow, which tells me that I might have been a little bit off on my ferric ammonium citrate. Maybe I put too much. Theirs is a little bit more yellow, which means it probably had more potassium ferrocyanide in it. Also, one thing that you'll notice on the video, they get a very nice thin coating. This was on the first try that I did, and I got it way too heavy. I'll tell you that right now. So what I did was, after I coated the paper, I thought it would be a good idea to just stack these in the garbage bag kind of portfolio that I did so that I could let them dry overnight. You want to dry them overnight in a place that doesn't get light. The problem with this is where they sit with each other. I didn't put any newsprint between, and you can see that these are the deposit of the solution on top is very, very heavy. Now, what this gives, whenever I exposed this, I have an exposure unit like the one that we have at school. You can easily do this with sunlight. Just make sure that you put, like the video says, you have your paper, your transparency on top, and then something like a piece of glass facing upward. You can see with this, I exposed it, and I figured out that about the time with the exposure unit was about 5 minutes. A little bit, 2 minutes is too little. I believe this is one of the first ones that I did that was about 2 minutes. And you can see the problem with the pooling of the chemical on the paper. You get this really erratic sense of texture. Here's the video of spraying these out. Once you've exposed it, you're just working with water, and you're spraying out everything that didn't get exposed. This is why it's important to do a negative, because what you're actually exposing are the clear spaces in your transparency. And where the light is getting through, it's hardening up that blue. So you can see here, it's a bit grainy, and the resolution, isn't so great. This is what it looks like. You do get a really cool effect with this, though. Here's another one. So this one was exposed for a little bit longer, so you can see some of the details in the background get filled in. This one was exposed for less, so more of this gets blown out whenever you rinse it with water. My second go around was better. I used French paper, which has a bit of a smoother surface, and I got more of an even coating. You can still see that there's brush marks. I tried really, really hard to get those brush strokes out. I'm not exactly sure how they were doing it on the video to get it so perfect, but they certainly were. So, and here's some of the results that I got on the second attempt. You can see I'm getting better resolution. I'm getting better tonal range. This is that transparency that I used for the example of making a bitmap. You can still see though, do you see these banding? This is from where I used that foam brush and was brushing that on. So it can certainly play into the end of your image with these types of mark making. This is perhaps the best one that turned out. I'll show you at the end the transparency. This one had a lot of grays, so it has a really, really nice tonal range. This is with that second coated paper. I got a much more even tone to it. And I don't know if letting the chemicals set overnight, this was the second batch that I did with the same mixture, but it has more of that cyan blue that's characteristic of these cyanotypes, thus the name. Here's another one. This is a wedding photo. Some of the fine detail of the tones got bleached out, and this is a textured element down here. So here's the 4 transparencies that I used. You can see that the upper right, the engine had the best results. You can see all these different grays that it has involved. I think that this transparency would have worked fine if I had a more evenly coated piece of paper. For some reason, if you have a lot of these dark tones, so these are really subtle lights, right? This all got washed out because it wasn't getting exposed enough. So what I would probably do is from the original image, I would shoot for getting more of these grays and these midtones. Okay. So again, email me with any questions. I've been through the process before. You do not have to go through this whole process with the chemicals. You can buy the pre-coated paper. It'll save you a lot of time. It's a little bit more pricey. If this is something that you feel like you could do a lot of and really want to experiment around with, this is the way to go. You can also, the paper comes, as it says, only on paper, but these chemicals can be put on fabric, any type of paper that you can imagine. You can then use it on, pre-printed paper. So it's a lot more versatile, but it's also a little bit more tricky as far as getting an even application. All right.